Over 3 million posts went up in social media the week after the shooting of healthcare executive Brian Thompson and the arrest of suspect Luigi Mangione.
I believe Luigi Mangione wanted to be caught. Here's why. McDonald's used to do Monopoly.
Many people were glued to their TV screens watching the 5-day manhunt, but many, many more were commenting, sharing and reacting online.
He was arrested and arraigned in Altoona, Pennsylvania on Monday after being spotted at McDonald's.
Lots were horrified at a cold-blooded murder, but a significant number had different thoughts.
There are two main places on the Monopoly board, Pennsylvania Avenue and Pennsylvania Railroad. Also worth mentioning is the go to jail.
After the arrest, theories about why Brian Thompson had been killed began to appear. Mangione denied the murder charges in court. A normal criminal process was beginning. But online, the theories became turbocharged and grew in popularity and extremes. From deep state involvement, professional assassins, fake backpacks, eyebrow length and Pokemon, the range of ideas was huge and still growing. Can we really know the identity of the shooter from the length of their eyebrows? Does Mangione's favourite Pokemon send us a message about his alleged motivations? You might think that's strange, but tens of thousands don't. Some of these are conspiracy theories, and when they're not challenged, they can become accepted as fact. Some shed light on the growing mistrust between authorities and the public. Some have an element of truth, and some are just plain wrong. They're just made up. I'm Jordan Dunbar. This is the Mangione Trial podcast from the BBC World Service. Our podcast looks at the unprecedented reaction to the killing of Brian Thompson, who was shot dead in the US city of New York, and to Luigi Mangione, who was charged with his murder and whose face went viral. In these episodes, we take a step back to unpick the conspiracies, consider the facts, and explain what happens in court. While this murder took place in the US, the reaction has been truly global. People picked up on what they thought were clues, feeding into conspiracy theories about who had committed this crime or why they'd done it. Much of that became almost like watching a crime series or a murder mystery game play out. Yet this is a real murder with a real victim and a man now facing the death penalty. So in this episode, we're going to ask why some people around the world have embraced conspiracy theories about the case, break down the facts and look at what we can actually prove. Right, let's get into it. With me is David Gilbert from technology magazine Wired and Dr Shauna Bowes, a clinical psychologist who studies conspiracy theories at Vanderbilt University in the United States. Guys, thanks so much for joining me.
Good to be here, Jordan.
Glad to be here.
Shauna, I want to start with you. Really basic question, but what is a conspiracy theory versus just an explanation? Are they always unhelpful? Are they always wrong?
There's a lot of debate in the literature about what precisely a conspiracy theory is, but kind of a widely agreed upon definition is that a conspiracy theory advances that a small group of powerful people act in secret to benefit themselves and harm the common good. So that's what makes it distinct from other kinds of explanations and claims, is it focuses on this powerful group of people acting in secret. And although we might like to think that conspiracy theories are always fringe or extreme or wrong, there are true and real conspiracy theories.
Right, and is that because theories are often, holding power to account and looking into different governments and authorities, and that's a healthy thing?
Conspiracies happen all the time in many ways. When we look around the world, there are powerful people who act in secret to benefit themselves and harm the common good. So we do need to monitor that as citizens.
Okay, and what's the tipping point then? When does it become unhealthy? When do they become unhelpful?
I think just like with any other sort of belief system, when people are so wedded to their views that all they can see is this particular belief, there's no room for changing their mind. There's no room for updating their belief. They're willing to act on their beliefs in really harmful or problematic ways. That's when we start to run into problems. I think the tipping point is level of belief commitment and a willingness to act on a belief in a non-normative, unhelpful way.
David, you're across all the big movements brewing online as part of your job. What did you make of the reaction and the conspiracies that came out around this case?
It was everywhere very quickly. And rather than seeing it kind of the typical way that we see conspiracy theories kind of emerge online, is typically filtering out through much smaller fringe networks like 4chan or 8chan or some of the kind of anonymous messaging platforms, and then moving on to maybe platforms like Reddit, and then eventually onto more mainstream platforms like Facebook and TikTok and X. This time around, it happened on the mainstream platforms first. It just happened everywhere very quickly.
And what was driving that appearance on the mainstream? Because I'm guessing that means different types of people, because different types of people use different social media, were seeing and spreading it.
Yeah, I think underlying everything was the fact that was this anger, this latent anger around the healthcare system in the US, that people have been angry for a long time about the way that system works. The reason it became viral so quickly was because the algorithms that power social networks feed these videos to people because they saw huge levels of engagement with them. And so the algorithms saw that and decided that people wanted more. And so they gave them more and more. This was people using their own faces, using their own names on mainstream platforms. And that is something that we don't see very often. They wanted to be part of this community that was very quickly emerging, and they very quickly decided that because this wasn't necessarily for them about the murder of a man or a father. This was about the US healthcare system. And they used Luigi Mangione, who initially they didn't know what his name was, but they used this figure as a kind of an avatar to project their anger. And that's how this community just emerged online almost overnight.
The other part of it is that a lot of them seem playful. They don't seem connected to a real murder at all. There was the eyebrow length comparison. Tell me about that theory. Yeah,
so this was, I suppose, when initially the shooting happened, the police released CCTV footage or images of the shooter, and people focused in on his eyebrows because that was one of the only parts of his face that people could see. So there was a bit of an obsession around that initially, but when he then was named and his picture was revealed online, or his mugshot was revealed online, people started immediately to compare the eyebrows from the first pictures to the new pictures. And a lot of people online said there's no way that this set of eyebrows could be, that this couldn't be the same person, because these set of eyebrows could not have grown that much. And what we saw was really in-depth discussions on subreddits about Luigi Mangione from people weighing in who are hairdressers, who said they've been hairdressers for decades and there's absolutely no way that someone's eyebrows could grow back that quickly, and other people coming back saying this is all about lighting, and that the pictures were taken in two different places, so of course the eyebrows could look different. And it just, as you say, it was a kind of a playful way of interacting with this conspiracy where you didn't really have to talk about the kind of the gruesome aspect of it.
Shauna, in your work, what did you make of things like the eyebrow comparison and these theories that seem quite distant from an actual murder?
I think there's several things that are going on with some of the conspiracy theories we're seeing with Mangione. I think conspiracy theories are often inherently entertaining. They get a thrill from talking about conspiracy theories, sharing conspiracy theories, and it provides us with this sense of social connection. And I also think, anger was brought up, and I think that's hugely important in this case. There was this sense of justice of, I'm mad about the healthcare system. We have this vigilante coming in and saving the day, and maybe there's this group of people that are actually behind this, and they're going to overhaul the American healthcare system. So I think we see several different emotional factors at play that made these really popular.
And we have an episode dedicated to trying to explain the American healthcare system, why it's so complicated and often controversial in the reform that you can find. But David, I wanted to come back to this idea that people didn't feel they need to be anonymous and personalities got involved. It's not like the dark web. Were people using it to get clicks, to get engagement, as in influencers or some influencers?
Yeah, that definitely happened. The influencers who make money on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, they would instantly have recognized that this was a trending topic and something that lots of people were interested in. And therefore, they would have crafted their own videos to leverage the popularity of this to boost engagement, to gain more followers, and ultimately to make more money.
So it's been turbocharged by the fact it was around an emotional subject in America. It wasn't in the kind of shady side bits of the internet you normally see. It was right out in the open where you have the biggest numbers of followers. That then drives the algorithm. People are willing to put their face to it and even get clicks from it. And they felt like it was a game. It was distance from murder. That's why it's been turbocharged. And we've seen so many theories. Dr. Shauna Bowes, you study the psychology behind why people engage in these theories. What do we get out of them?
There's something called the proportionality bias that's really at play here, where we tend to believe that big events must have really big causes. We think, okay, a really big thing must have caused that. And oftentimes the official explanation isn't very satisfying because it doesn't feel big enough. It doesn't feel right. And conspiracy theories, I think, promise to provide a sense of certainty and a sense of safety, even if just in the short term. And I think also that social connection piece we can't overlook. If people are feeling scared or isolated, or they're looking for more entertainment and thrill in their life, and now there's this group of people where they can connect and talk and dig into this real truth and have this unique knowledge, I think that's very attractive and very appealing for so many people.
Shauna, there's a stereotype people have of conspiracy theorists, sat in a dark room with the pin board. There's a famous meme connecting all of the dots. How true is that to what you've seen in your work?
I don't think it's really true at all from what I've seen from my work. I think, yes, there's definitely a subset of conspiracy believers and individuals who are so wedded to their beliefs that they're almost impaired by it, where they are very isolated, the stereotype of sitting in your mom's basement and connecting the red twine. I do think those individuals exist, but I think most conspiracy theorists are not that. And I don't think those stereotypes are often helpful, because if we want to promote accurate information, help people satisfy those psychological needs and motivations in more helpful, adaptive ways, then we can't be distancing ourselves from these individuals. We're not above them. We're not different from them.
So, I mean, if it's popular, people are getting a sense of relief, there's community around it, what's the problem? What are the dangers behind it?
Scores of studies now show that conspiracy belief does predict a range of harmful outcomes, including less engagement with evidence-based health practices, more support for non-normative political action, including violence, more prejudice against a range of outgroups, which I think makes sense because you're trying to find a group of people who are the conspirators. So it can lead to more prejudice, more polarization, more negative attitudes. And those are just a few of the consequences of conspiracy belief.
And as we've heard with theories around the Mangione case, these are mainstream. It's everywhere. It's around the world. It's millions and millions of people.
One of the most interesting things from the Luigi Mangione case is the fact that there's a repetition of the number 286.
Luigi Mangione is leaving 286s everywhere, dude.
People have started connecting dots around the number 286.
There's a huge amount of conspiracies around the case out there. We mentioned the eyebrows earlier, but David, I'd like to look now at the number pattern of 286. What is going on with this one?
Yeah, so this is one that was, again, picked up by the kind of community and the immediate aftermath of Mangione's arrest. So first they found this number 286 and found various connections to it within his profile and the things that he did. So what they said was they looked at his profile on X and found that it featured the Pokemon Breloom, which is the 286th Pokemon. And also on his X account, he had posted 286 times, they said, by the time he was arrested. So then some people connected it to the health insurance companies by saying that 286 was the code used when the appeal time limits for a healthcare claim are not met. There was some people, I think, on TikTok pointing out that there was a potential connection to the Bible because Proverbs 28:6 states that better is a poor man who walks in his integrity than a rich man who is crooked in his ways. And finally, some people online claim that the distance between where Luigi Mangione was arrested in Altoona was 286 miles exactly from where Brian Thompson was shot in Midtown Manhattan. So when they combined all of those, they felt that this was something really important, that 286 had a huge significance.
David, is the point of this theory that allegedly Luigi Mangione is trying to tell us about his motivations by doing things that link to these numbers? What is the theory telling us?
I think that's the implication. Like, with a lot of these theories, it's the journey rather than the conclusion that really matters. It was the fact that people wanted to be involved in the conversation. You know, if you were the one who found out that Luigi Mangione posted 286 times on his Twitter and you were able to fit it into the rest of the conspiracy, then you will be hailed within this community as, you know, a genius, as someone who everyone else should listen to. You will get that kudos that people crave, and that kudos comes with massive, you know, dopamine hits, because if you're told in real life that you're great, then, you know, it feels good. It equally feels good if you're told by tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people online that, you know, you've uncovered something that's hidden.
So we wanted to take a look at the different elements around this 286 theory and then show you how we've tried to find the links if they exist. Producer Melanie Stewart-Smith has been with me. Mel, you've been checking through these.
That's right.
So one fact I can confirm is that the Pokemon character Breloom is the 286th Pokemon in the game's collection, or Pokedex as it's known.
Someone's a super fan.
I've just done my research. It's a grass-fighting Pokemon that evolves from the character Shroomish at level 23. But most importantly, an image of Breloom was and still is the cover photo on Luigi Mangione's X account.
That's right. And of course, you're not alone being a super fan, Jordan, because being a Pokemon lover is extremely common. Pokemon Go, which is an online or mobile version of the game, that alone boasts over 90 million monthly active players worldwide.
What about the claim that there are 286 posts on his Twitter or X account?
That's right. So the easiest way to see how many posts someone has done on X is to go to the replies tab when you're on the front of their profile. It's right at the top and it says there the post count, and on @PepMangione, as of right now, it says 285.
Just 285, so it's 286 not true.
Well, that's not necessarily the case. Firstly, because obviously we want to be thorough, we did a manual count of all of his tweets and replies. So this is where things get a little bit strange though, because on the manual count, which we did several times, we got 281 posts.
Okay, why would that be?
Well, it is possible that there's been a categorization error here. X briefly suspended Luigi's account when he was arrested. It has been reinstated, so this can sometimes throw up some errors. We've asked X about this, but they have not responded. Don't forget, though, it's also possible that posts have been deleted. So we needed to look back in time to find out a bit more.
Okay, so if those 5 posts exist, they're not going to get away.
Absolutely not.
I definitely remember seeing screenshots of 286 posts from his X account.
That's right. You have remembered correctly. There were plenty of screenshots out there of 286 posts from that replies tab. Those screenshots were posted all over. Now, there are some brilliant open source websites that we can use that enable us to see what a site used to look like in the past.
So open source meaning that anyone can access it?
Absolutely. So these open source sites, they take a snapshot of the data and the coding that's behind a website. It's the stuff you can't see from the outside. The code's like a blueprint for displaying Luigi Mangione's X account. And one of these sites is called the Wayback Machine. We queried it to look at the saved data behind Luigi's account. His last activity on X was on June the 10th, 2024, and the last available snapshot of data from his account was from June 11th. So it was quite up to date. And that code shows that the number of posts from @PepMangione was 286.
So is that it then? We can confirm 286 posts?
Well, firstly, because obviously it's always important to verify. We went to another site that does exactly the same job, and that also shows the number of posts to be 286, and that was on the day he was arrested. These sites really are the best evidence that we have been able to find that show on December 9th, Luigi Mangione may well have had 286 posts on his X account.
So, as far as we can tell, the claim about 286 posts on his X account is true.
That's correct.
One of the most shared pieces of alleged evidence that there is some message around the number 286 is the claim that the number's related to a code that's used by health insurance companies.
That's right. The claim was that this code is used when someone has had a denial, so they wouldn't get their care paid for, and the time limit they have to appeal that decision has run out.
How did we look into this one?
So I began by emailing the top 6 health insurance providers in the United States. One of them did direct me to the AHIP, that is the industry body for health insurers. They in turn pushed me to a body called X12.
Right, so we asked the top insurers. We didn't get a clear answer, but we did get told to go and speak to the very sci-fi sounding X12. Who are they?
Yes, so X12 is an organisation that the US government relies on to create codes that work across different industries, like mining, healthcare, transportation, and it enables them to communicate effectively with one another.
Right, so they make sure the codes that health insurance companies, that they're all the same so they can communicate with each other easily.
That's absolutely right. So I contacted X12 directly and got a very concise response telling me to look here with a link to a code that does in fact say 286 appeal time limits not met.
So it looks like that number is linked to health insurance denials.
It does, absolutely.
Another theory it's claimed reveals the significance of 286 is the Bible verse Proverbs 28:6 being about inequality.
That's right. So looking at multiple different versions of the Bible, they do say within Proverbs 28:6 different variations upon a poor person with integrity is better than a rich one who is dishonest. But let's bear in mind, the Bible is full of many different proverbs and quotes and sayings that are all applicable to different aspects of life.
The final piece of the 286 jigsaw was about the McDonald's restaurant that Luigi Mangione was arrested at. The claim being that it is 286 miles from where the shooting took place in New York.
Yes, thankfully this one's a little bit easier to check. This one, I just used multiple different map providers and found that the McDonald's in Altoona, where he was arrested, is not 286 miles from the location of the shooting. The best route, if you were to drive it, is 281 miles. And if you were to measure in a straight line or as the crow flies, then it's 231 miles.
So, I haven't taken a deeper look into this claim. You can find links to the number 286, but it's more whether they're relevant or whether they're actually telling us that can't really be proved.
Absolutely. So it's really important to remember here that Luigi Mangione has denied the murder charges. And as far as we know, neither he, himself, or his legal team have made any suggestion that 286 is relevant in this case.
Thanks, Mel.
Thanks.
Shauna, the buzz of people, finding links or patterns, it's fairly common pastime, like Wordle, Sudoku, crosswords, been around for a while. But why would people spend hours and hours and hours of their time engaging in this about a crime?
I think the entertainment value stands out here also. You mentioned Sudoku and Wordle. The human mind likes to solve problems. We like to make meaning out of things. There's something called illusory pattern perception, where we tend to see patterns even where they don't exist. And in terms of the crime element, true crime is a huge genre in terms of podcasts, TV shows. People really like to try to figure out why a crime happened and who did it.
But how are people managing to detach for this entertainment value that, it is a real murder? There is a real victim. There is a real family behind that. There is someone facing the death penalty.
Yeah, I think people can detach from it. I like how it was put that it's like the journey rather than the destination. I think the game is the worldview. The entertainment is the worldview, and everything else is kind of put on a shelf. They're thinking about this big conspiracy, this big game, and I think they're able to separate it because they're not involved in it. It's so removed from them, and they're just trying to figure out the truth. And I think we do this on a smaller scale with true crime. When we listen to podcasts and watch TV shows about these gruesome murders or horrible stories, we just want to figure it out. And we're not really thinking about the fact that these are real people with real stories and real tragedies.
Another example of that is the theory that had people debating and researching for weeks online, the idea that clues to the murder all somehow link back to the US version of the board game Monopoly.
By placing Monopoly money in the backpack, Luigi was very clearly telling us that we're playing Monopoly, not chess.
David, talk me through that one.
So this one this conspiracy happened very quickly after the shooting because the police found a backpack in Central Park that they believed was dropped by the shooter, and the backpack contained money from the game Monopoly. So that then kind of was simmering along for a while. People weren't really sure what was happening, but then he got arrested in Altoona, and people figured out very quickly that that's the home of the Pennsylvania Railroad, which is one of 4 railroads for sale in the standard US version of the game. And of course, he was also arrested at McDonald's, which for years has run a promotional campaign with the game in its stores. So all of those combined again were kind of taken or jumped on as very big clues in this conspiracy that this had something to do with Monopoly. But again, like the 286 conspiracy and the eyebrows conspiracy, there was no real answer or, conclusion to this. People didn't figure out what it all meant. But again, that didn't necessarily matter in the end.
Pennsylvania is one of the 4 railroad stations in the US Monopoly board, but there are 3 others there too. Reading Railroad, B&O Railroad, Short Line, Pennsylvania Railroad, biggest rail line in the US, which is why it's on the board. Just a real fact for you there. So it feels like it's less about debunking and more about just what's actually relevant, because these are facts that are true, but are they relevant at all?
They're completely irrelevant when you actually look at it in context, because it doesn't make any sense. There are no connections to the shooting here. For it to be a real conspiracy, you would have to believe that Luigi Mangione on purpose traveled to Altoona to be arrested in a McDonald's, which he knew was running the promotion for the game, which just doesn't make any sense, because the reason he was arrested was because a customer identified him and reported him to a member of staff who rang the police. It wasn't like he went up to them and said, "I'm Luigi Mangione, can you arrest me, please?" So the fact that it doesn't make sense doesn't really matter. They were willing to kind of overlook the reality of the situation, which is what happens in many conspiracy theories.
It's the idea of you find something and then someone else wants to find something, you're kind of all piling on, and that's where the excitement, the addiction comes to. It doesn't actually matter what it proves or what the narrative is. It's just in the moment, people are doing it and doing it and doing it. The next one is very different. It's one that we see quite a lot in big events, which is the idea that the Secret Service or a shadowy intelligence agency are involved in the event, in this case, in the murder. This time it's the US Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA. Tell me about that.
Yeah, and this is a conspiracy theory that we see crop up after pretty much every major event or incident that happens these days. It's the idea that the person who perpetrated this is somehow a CIA plant or a CIA patsy, and that they are doing it on behalf of the government. If you think about it, the CIA did run a program back in the 1950s and the 1960s called MK Ultra, which was designed to test drugs as mind control on unsuspecting people, so that they wanted to be able to control these people effectively. So that did actually happen. That's a real thing that happened for a couple of decades before it was shut down. And it never worked. It didn't happen. But that kind of kernel of truth now informs what we see today, because people just believe that the CIA is doing these type of secretive tests and secretive experiments on people today, like they were back in the 1950s and the 1960s. And so it's a convenient way of explaining what happens. So in this case, because Luigi Mangione, there is no obvious reason why or initially at least there wasn't any obvious reason why he would have shot Brian Thompson, then the idea that the CIA is experimenting on people again, and he is one of those people, that kind of makes more sense to them.
It's interesting because Luigi Mangione has denied all of these charges. Does the information coming out like that, does that affect these types of narratives and these theories?
Not to a large proportion of this community anyway. They are going to continue to believe that whatever he says is part of the conspiracy. If he is denying the fact that he is the shooter, that doesn't mean necessarily that he isn't the shooter. It's just that he is playing the game and that this is part of the grand conspiracy. And they will be able to construct a narrative so that whatever he says fits into their version of reality, which is what happens in a lot of conspiracy theories.
Everything I've heard really strikes me. A lot of it's about trust. David, if the information that you're getting comes from the mainstream media and people don't trust the mainstream media, I'm guessing lots of people online are turning to other sources. They'll believe them first.
Yeah, look, there's no secret of the fact that trust in the media is at a kind of historic low, especially in the US, where this kind of a conspiracy took hold. People are no longer buying newspapers. People are no longer even subscribing to cable TV. So instead, what they're doing is they are using the same platforms where this conspiracy theory exploded. They are using TikTok, they're using Instagram, they're using YouTube, they're using X as their news source. As a result, they both no longer look at mainstream media, but they're also being told that the mainstream media is something that you shouldn't trust, because the people who they are listening to on these platforms want to make sure that the people, that their audiences don't fall back and go and look at the New York Times or CNN or Fox News or whatever it may be. They want them to stay here. So to do that, they need to tell them that the mainstream media is not to be trusted, and therefore people are just not getting the type of verified fact-check news that they used to in the past. And as a result, they are more likely to hear conspiracy theories that haven't been fact-checked, but do kind of fill the narrative or fit the narrative that they're, the news makers on these platforms are pushing.
Shauna, as the trial gets closer, what can the authorities and the media do to try and stop the spread of disinformation and misinformation and theories just going unchecked?
It's such an important question because I think so often we place the burden of belief change or fact checking on individuals. Misinformation is often spread intentionally. And we often don't do a great job as scientists, journalists, politicians of communicating transparently. Even when we're trying to communicate about accurate information, I think we leave too many gaps and we don't explain why we're arriving at certain conclusions or how. And I think that fuels that lack of trust in institutions because people can't fill in the gaps themselves, or they can't fill it in accurately, or they don't know where to turn.
Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
So great to be here. Thanks for having us.
That's it from this episode of the Mangione Trial podcast from the BBC World Service. Thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe to the World Service YouTube channel so you never miss a thing. If you've heard a claim you want us to fact check or a question for us to tackle, you can email us at themangionetrial@bbc.co.uk or WhatsApp us. Just scan this QR code.